The battle in the observation hall of the Separatist ship was at its peak. Anakin advanced against Dooku with precise fury, while the sabers clashed like red and blue lightning amid the metallic sound of combat. The Count retreated with difficulty, feeling the force around him stir in an unusual way, as if something greater than the duel was about to be revealed. Even Anakin, driven by the heat of battle, hesitated for an instant, his eyes scanning the environment as if searching for the origin of that vibration that shook every inch of the air. Even Palpatine, seated on his improvised throne in that false kidnapping, slightly raised his eyebrows, surprised by what he felt. It was at that moment of strange stillness that Dooku delivered a quick, almost opportunistic strike, but Anakin deflected it with impossible reflexes and disarmed him. The red saber flew across the hall, spinning in the air until it lodged itself in the polished floor, and the young Jedi raised his own saber to the enemy's neck, who had nearly lost both hands in that last attack. The Count breathed heavily, his eyes fixed on his fate, while Palpatine, with a venomous tone, ordered, "Finish it! End him now!" The silence seemed to weigh tons upon Anakin's chest, and for a moment all that existed was the labored breathing of the three. Suddenly a brightness cut through the air. A presence that did not belong to that material place rose between the saber and the Count's neck. It was Qui-Gon Jinn, wrapped in a translucent mantle of light, his countenance calm and at the same time solemn. He raised his hand and said firmly, "He is my master. Don't do this, Anakin." The blue blade that nearly touched Dooku's skin trembled, and Anakin himself stepped back half a pace, as if struck by an invisible electric shock. Dooku widened his eyes, unable to believe what he saw. Palpatine, however, did not remain silent. Even without letting the others notice, he fumed in silence. His voice echoed more intensely, "It's a trick, boy. Finish what you started. This is the path to your victory, to our victory." But before he could say more, Qui-Gon turned to him and, with a gentle gesture, enveloped the Chancellor in a silent wave of the Force. The sound of Sidious's voice simply vanished, as if it had been ripped out of space. Palpatine moved his lips, but no sound escaped. The contrast was so powerful that even Anakin felt chills at that display. Qui-Gon's spirit then turned his attention to the apprentice who had once been just a child on Tatooine. "Anakin," he said, his voice sounding like a soft echo, "vengeance is not the way. If you take this life now, you will not destroy the shadows. You will open the door for them to consume you completely. This is the beginning of the prison they want to build around you." The tone was not one of reprimand, but of a warning filled with love and responsibility. Dooku, for his part, remained motionless. His heavy breathing revealed more than the fear of death. There was the impact of hearing the voice of a man he had known better than most. "Qui-Gon," he murmured, almost powerless, as if standing before a ghost that brought not only memories, but also long-buried regrets. The Count's haughty expression wavered between the hardness and fragility of one reliving a painful past. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, lying unconscious near the staircase, began to stir, on the verge of waking. His still-closed eyes saw nothing, but his expression changed, as if the Force itself shook him to sense the magnitude of what was happening. He murmured something inaudible, his body in light convulsions, until his arm moved as if trying to reach for something invisible. It was the Force, echoing through everyone in that hall, connecting them to a broader truth. Anakin, still with his saber lit in his hand, looked alternately at the defenseless Count, the silent Chancellor, and the ghost of Qui-Gon. His heart beat rapidly, his breathing echoed louder than any sound in the room. Anger burned, but with it came the weight of a different, deeper calling. He knew that any choice in that instant would forever change the destiny of the galaxy. Qui-Gon approached, the aura of light enveloping even the blade of Anakin's saber. "Listen to me, Anakin. We are not defined by the battles we win, but by the ones we choose not to fight. There is a truth you need to know, something that has been hidden from all of us. Before you act, allow me to tell you what is truly at stake." His voice sounded like relief amid the storm, inviting the young man to step back. For a few seconds, Anakin closed his eyes tightly. Palpatine's words, even silenced, seemed to echo in his mind, blending with Qui-Gon's appeal. It was an internal battle as fierce as the duel he had fought moments earlier. The air in the hall had become heavy, charged with tension, as if the entire universe was awaiting his decision. And then, with a deep sigh, Anakin lowered the blade. The saber was deactivated with a snap, and the silence that followed echoed like thunder. His gaze was fixed on Qui-Gon, not on Dooku nor on Palpatine. For the first time since wielding that weapon, Anakin seemed willing to listen before acting, even if it was against everything his heart cried out for. Dooku fell to his knees, still unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. Palpatine, frustrated, struggled against the silence that enveloped him, while Qui-Gon remained firm between them, serene like the Force itself. "Anakin," said the ghost, extending his luminous hand, "if you wish to save everyone, start by listening. Only then can you escape the chains that are being forged around you." The ghost of Qui-Gon raised his luminous hand and lightly touched Anakin's forehead. A flash coursed through his mind, and within seconds the young man was no longer in the ship's hall, but in an ethereal space, where images of the past formed before his eyes. Surprised, Anakin realized he was not alone. Dooku was also there, equally touched by the spirit. Both watched in silence, their bodies lighter, as if they were floating within the very Force. The vision was a river of memories, and they would be only witnesses. The images showed a younger Qui-Gon, moving with determination through the Jedi Temple. Unlike the other masters, he sought the living Force, not only the rigid traditions of the Council. He was a Jedi who listened to the invisible whispers of the galaxy, believing that wisdom came not only from rules but from the essence of life in motion. As Anakin absorbed those scenes, he felt deep in his heart the same restlessness that had guided him all along, the sensation that rules were insufficient in the face of the universe's pain. Then, a new memory opened. Dooku appeared, not as the imposing Sith Anakin knew, but as a respected master, instructing Qui-Gon with patience. His figure bore nobility, and his voice resonated clearly as he taught that balance required understanding politics and power as much as the Force. Qui-Gon listened attentively, but even then it was clear that he would follow a path distinct from his master. The contrast between student and teacher was evident, and Anakin could see the weight of that bond clearly. Both Anakin and Dooku tried to approach the images, but they could not. They were only shadows watching shadows. The ethereal nature of that vision prevented them from interfering. The calm rhythm of those visions and the spiritual presence of Qui-Gon also deeply calmed them and prevented them from warring. It was as if they stood before crystallized echoes of the past, and that only reinforced the impact. To see, but not to change. For Anakin, that was almost torturous, for his instinct had always been to act. For Dooku, it was a mirror he wished he had never seen. The dialogue between Qui-Gon and Dooku stood out. "The Council closes itself too much in its traditions," said Qui-Gon. "The Force is alive. It is in constant change, and we must listen to it." Dooku, rigid, responded, "Without discipline, the Force becomes chaos. You risk being dragged into directions you do not understand." The conversation was more than a debate. It was the harbinger of the separation of paths. The student believed in instinct and life, the master in order and control. Both, however, carried partial truths that would shape the galaxy's future. It was at that point that Qui-Gon turned to the two present in the vision. "Anakin, understand. Palpatine is not just a politician. He is the architect of a web that ensnares us all, manipulating the destiny of the galaxy in secret." The words echoed like thunder in the young Jedi's mind. Then, looking at Dooku, he continued, "And as for you, my master, know that he will use you to the end and then replace you without hesitation. The next in line already stands before us." Dooku widened his eyes, denying it out loud, but deep in his heart he knew he had almost been discarded. Just moments ago he had heard the Chancellor giving the order for Anakin to attack him. In the real world, Obi-Wan was waking. His blurred vision found Palpatine sitting, gesturing in silence, as if struggling to free himself from invisible chains. The Jedi Master rose with difficulty and looked around, confused. "What is happening here?" he murmured. Before he could draw his saber, he heard a calm voice. Qui-Gon, speaking from beyond. "Kenobi, be at peace. Anakin is safe. He needs this moment. And you, more than anyone, have guided the young man to this point. Your work has been valuable." Obi-Wan froze, unable to believe it, but a subtle peace filled his chest. "Still, I had to intervene to prevent something worse. Remember that death is not the end, for we are always alive for and in the Force. Even if we fall, we will continue guiding those who come next. Sacrifices are necessary, my friend and disciple. I hope you understand." Back in the memories, Anakin began to tremble. He felt that Qui-Gon was trying to show him something he had always ignored, that the true enemy was not before his blade, but seated at his side in every war council. Dooku, realizing this, lost his composure. The haughty expression gave way to visible unease. He began to pace in circles, his eyes sparking with anger, as if trying to break free from the prison of that revelation. His impatience caused the vision to begin to fragment, like glass about to shatter. Qui-Gon, seizing the last moments, spoke with urgency. "The Jedi Council has its flaws, but the Force must not be ignored. If they do not listen to the call of life, they will fall into traps. Trust but question. Follow the light, but do not bind yourself to the chains that blind." His words multiplied in echoes, crossing the ethereal space, trying to remain in Anakin's mind before everything dissipated. Anakin, distressed, raised his voice. "And my future? Will I see Padme die? Will I become the shadow that everyone fears?" The luminous figure of Qui-Gon looked at him with tenderness. "The future is always in motion. It is not written in stone, but in the heart that chooses. If you control your anger, you can remain in the light. It is not the Force that condemns you, Anakin, but the choices you make." And turning to Dooku, he added, "There is still time for you. You do not need to be an instrument. You can be free." The vision began to fade like smoke. Anakin felt the solid floor of the ship return beneath his feet, the weight of the saber once again in his hand. Panting, he blinked several times, trying to separate reality from memory. Palpatine, still trapped in Qui-Gon's silence, watched him with narrowed eyes, perceiving the hesitation that was growing in the heart of the Chosen One. The confidence he had always had that Anakin would fall into his hands was now beginning to corrode. The vision ended like a flame slowly going out. The glow that surrounded the room faded, and with it the firm and serene presence of Qui-Gon Jinn. Silence returned to settle in, and with it the weight of reality. Palpatine finally regained his voice, his lips twisting in false relief. Anakin and Dooku exchanged a long look. Neither seemed the same after what they had witnessed. Kenobi, still stunned, whispered, "What was that?" But before any answer could come, Palpatine's cold and cutting order sliced through the air. "Now, boy, kill him." Anakin's saber trembled in his hand. The young man took a deep breath, feeling that the choice before him was more than just a strike. It was the line between light and darkness. He lowered the weapon, the blue blade retracting with a metallic hum. "No," he said firmly, looking at Dooku and then at Palpatine. Obi-Wan let out a sigh of relief, his eyes filled with pride. Palpatine, however, froze inside. His anger was a volcano about to erupt, but his face molded itself into a mask of patience, and he spoke sweetly. "Mercy is weakness, my boy. You should have done what was necessary." Dooku, exhausted and wounded, raised his eyes to the young Jedi. His eyes carried a strange mixture of resentment and respect. He had never imagined that an apprentice would dare disobey the Chancellor, let alone in the name of a code that had so often proven flawed. He saw in Anakin not just a warrior, but someone touched by something greater, something that vaguely reminded him of Qui-Gon's flame. This realization left him confused, almost vulnerable. At the same time, The Count himself could not stop reliving the same dialogue he had had with his deceased student countless times. Dooku began to wonder if he had been on the wrong side all this time, if it was too late, if he had erred at some point. Kenobi, recovering, approached quickly and spoke. "The right path is never the easiest. Protect the Republic, but protect also your soul." Obi-Wan's words echoed in Anakin's mind like an anchor of lucidity. The young Jedi then turned and, in a grave tone, said, "The true danger has been before us all along. It is the Chancellor himself." Obi-Wan was shocked, unable to respond immediately. Palpatine, in turn, smiled with disdain. "Lies. Once again, the Council poisons your mind." But Anakin remained serious, and Obi-Wan supported his student and demanded some answers. Dooku was still absorbed in his thoughts about the dialogue with Qui-Gon. The mask fell. Palpatine rose, his eyes glowing amber, and the room was filled with a suffocating energy. "Enough games!" He raised his hands and unleashed a whirlwind of lightning at the two Jedi. Kenobi was struck full on, hurled violently against the wall. Anakin raised his saber at the last instant, deflecting part of the energy, his muscles straining against the overwhelming power of the Sith. The secret was revealed. The Chancellor was the Dark Lord. Dooku, astonished, hesitated. The new order from his master echoed in his mind. "Kill the two Jedi right now." But his body did not obey. He only stood still, watching the chaos. Palpatine noticed his indecision and, with a roar, turned against him. Force lightning enveloped the Count, who screamed in pain. "Useless traitor!" bellowed Palpatine, punishing the disciple who no longer served him. Dooku fell to his knees, his face marked by shock and despair. The fight exploded into frenzy. Anakin recovered and advanced with ferocity, his saber cutting the air in swift movements. First, he spun the blade and defended himself from another lightning strike. Then, he slid underneath and attempted a diagonal strike that nearly hit the Chancellor. Next, a force-boosted leap placed him over Palpatine, but he was repelled by an invisible shove. The fourth move was a powerful cut that the Sith deflected with his own energized hands, sparking explosions. Kenobi, recovering, joined the fight, but the two could not break through the enemy's wall of power. Palpatine brandished his red saber and seemed ever closer to defeating the two Jedi. Each leap was a challenge and each feint treacherous. Anakin was already covered with shallow cuts, and Obi-Wan feared the moment when he would be struck deeply. Despair took hold. Palpatine advanced like a living storm, and each blow seemed to push the Jedi closer to defeat. Kenobi, between defenses, remembered the words of sacrifice he had heard so often in the Jedi teachings. He knew there was no other way out. Looking quickly at Anakin, he made his decision. "You are the one who must survive." With a sudden gesture, Obi-Wan concentrated the Force and hurled it at Anakin. The young man was slammed against the wall, knocked out by the intensity of the impact. Before Palpatine could react, Dooku, still wounded, crawled to the unconscious Jedi's body and held him by the shoulders. "Take him," ordered Kenobi with a hoarse voice. "It's what Qui-Gon would have done." Gathering his last strength, Dooku carried Anakin out of the room. The corridors of the ship trembled with battle. Explosions echoed, the screams of clones and droids mingled, and Dooku, nearly breathless, continued on with the body of the Chosen One in his arms. Behind them, the fight raged on. Palpatine and Kenobi clashed in an uneven duel. With each step further away, the Count heard the echo of sabers and the roar of the Force. Until, at last, a piercing cry resounded, Obi-Wan's voice, in one final act of resistance. The worst had happened. Obi-Wan was dead. Back on Coruscant, the atmosphere was tense. Mace Windu and Yoda watched, exchanging silent glances. Dooku had appeared enigmatically, bringing a wounded Anakin, and the revelations about the Chancellor were beginning to erode trust at the heart of the Republic. "Something is not right," murmured Windu, his eyes narrowing. "The shadow is closer than we thought," said the Master of Vapad, and Yoda merely closed his eyes, reflecting in silence. It was at that moment that Anakin awoke. His eyes opened slowly, and the first thing he saw was the ceiling of the Jedi Temple. Confusion dominated his mind. Memories of Obi-Wan's sacrifice mixed with Palpatine's furious gaze. The silence of the room was broken by the sound of his heavy breathing. He was alive, but he knew nothing would ever be the same. Thus ended the third chapter, leaving the galaxy on the edge of the abyss. Anakin awoke in the Jedi Temple with a heavy heart and a clouded mind. The Masters were gathered before him, and each gaze carried both expectation and suspicion. His hoarse voice broke the silence. "The Chancellor, he is not who he claims to be. He revealed himself as a Sith Lord. Kenobi and I fought against him, but—" His breath faltered. Dooku, who remained there in silence, spoke coldly. "It was the end of Kenobi. He fell to ensure that the Chosen One would survive." The words cut through Anakin like blades. He rose abruptly, consumed by fury, advancing against the Count. The saber almost ignited, but Mace Windu firmly restrained him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Control yourself, Skywalker," said Windu, his voice firm. "Do not let anger guide you." But Anakin trembled, his eyes sparking with the desire for vengeance. Dooku did not avert his gaze, as if he accepted any fate. Yoda, however, intervened. "If not for Dooku and Kenobi, dead you would be as well, young Skywalker." The calm voice brought weight to the hall. Dooku then surprised everyone by kneeling before Master Yoda. "This was not what I wanted," he said, his eyes brimming. "The visions of Qui-Gon showed me the trap I built. I was foolish, I was blind, and I was betrayed. But I swear, before the Force, that I will fight alongside you. Not for myself, but to end him." The silence was absolute. The entire council observed the former Sith in a posture of surrender. Dooku's aristocratic pride seemed stripped away, and in its place was only a man devastated by the weight of his own choice. Anakin stepped back a few paces, confused, not knowing whether to accept or despise that gesture. The past said that Dooku was an enemy, but the Force whispered something different. Yoda nodded slowly. "Your choice it is, but heavy will be the path of return." Meanwhile, Palpatine, realizing that his disguise no longer served him, rose in the Senate of Coruscant with fury. His voice echoed, amplified by every transmitter of the city planet. "Join the Jedi and die. The Republic has fallen. The Empire of Truth begins now." His words reverberated like thunder, spreading fear to every corner of the galaxy. The Separatist leaders, mercenaries, and droid armies received the order. The invasion of Coruscant began with brutality. The streets of the capital trembled. From space, Separatist fleets surrounded the planet. On the ground, endless waves of droids marched, gunning down any resistance. The people ran in despair, sheltering in tunnels and hangars in the lower levels. In the Jedi Temple, preparation was immediate. Dooku revealed Palpatine's secrets, hidden routes, command codes, concealed weapons. "He always planned a war within the war," he confessed. "And he will use everything now." The Jedi listened intently, knowing that every detail would be vital. The attack began in multiple locations. Mace Windu led the defense in the main streets, alongside Masters and clones, repelling hordes of droids with precise strikes. His purple saber cut through ranks of enemies, and his voice guided the soldiers with relentless discipline. Yoda, meanwhile, faced Separatist generals in fierce duels. He leapt between tanks, dodged blaster fire, and disarmed enemy leaders, showing that he was still the living essence of the Force. Anakin, guided by Dooku, infiltrated the enemy lines in search of the core, Palpatine. The journey was full of ambushes, and with every step Anakin felt the weight of war grow heavier. When they finally reached a dark chamber at the heart of the Senate building, the Sith Lord awaited them. "You came together? What delicious irony," said Palpatine, his eyes burning with fire. "The apprentice I rejected, and the chosen one I shaped with my own hands." Dooku stepped forward, rage overflowing. "You used me, and now you will pay for everything." Palpatine only laughed, raising his hands in scorn. "Do not seek redemption through vengeance, old fool. You never had the strength to replace me." His words poisoned the air, and Anakin felt his heart race. "You will control no one else," he shouted, igniting his saber. The final duel had begun. The strikes were devastating. Anakin attacked first, unleashing rapid cuts that Palpatine deflected with the red blade, spinning with surprising agility. Dooku tried to flank him, but Force lightning hurled him against the wall. Then Palpatine leapt and launched a wave of energy that Anakin blocked, his arms trembling with the impact. In the counterattack, Dooku lifted debris and hurled it at the Sith, only to see it shattered with a simple gesture. The battle raged at a frantic pace. Anakin managed to surprise Palpatine with a diagonal cut, which the Sith deflected, though it scorched his cloak. Palpatine responded with a swift spin, temporarily disarming Dooku and throwing him to the ground. Anakin dove against him, the sabers clashing in an explosion of sparks. A scarlet bolt cut through the air, striking Anakin's shoulder, and he cried out in pain. The entire chamber seemed to tremble with the collision of powers. Dooku, bleeding, rose one last time. He charged Palpatine, seizing his arms with force, preventing the lightning from being released. "Now, Skywalker, finish this." Anakin hesitated for an instant, seeing in the Count's eyes not an enemy, but someone ready for sacrifice. Palpatine roared, struggling to break free. Then, with a precise strike, Anakin pierced the chests of both, the lightsaber cutting through flesh and darkness at the same time. Dooku's body fell with dignity, and Palpatine finally went silent, the darkness dissipating like smoke. Anakin fell to his knees, exhausted, staring at the two bodies before him. Then, a gentle breeze swept through the chamber. The spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn appeared, serene, gazing at his former master and at the pupil he now guided. Beside him, the luminous form of Obi-Wan appeared, smiling tenderly. "You chose the light, Anakin," said Qui-Gon. "And even in the fall, there was redemption." Obi-Wan added, "Sacrifice is never in vain, if it is for what is just." The young Jedi lifted his face, feeling tears burn his eyes. For the first time, the darkness seemed distant and hope possible. Thus, at the end of the confrontation, balance returned, not without losses, but with the promise of a brighter future for the galaxy.